Released by Nihon Falcom in 2007 on the PC and later ported to the PlayStation Portable, The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky III would be a direct sequel to Trails in the Sky's second chapter, picking up directly after the events of the last chapter. Directed by Toshihiro Kondo and written by Hisayoshi Takeiri, the game would feature an imported save option, a large amount of world-building lore, and several minigames. The story only gets larger from here, so let's cut it down to size with a recapitation. As the game begins, the Libel arc breaks apart as it falls from the sky above Liberl following the Oriole's removal. From a distance, Ouroboros enforcers Blue Blanc and Volter accept the defeat, knowing that Luciola is missing and probably alive, while Louve is missing and very likely dead. Within, Campanella enters a private space to speak to the other Anguisses of the Society, relaying the news that Wiseman is dead and detailing how it happened. Hearing it was related to the singularity of Northumbria, the Salt Pale, they suspect it was the work of a church dominion, and Campanella confirms it was Kevin the Heretic Hunter, the 5th Dominion, who studied under the Grand Master of the Gralsritter and 1st Dominion, Carnelia. The other Anguisses laugh at Wiseman's fall but lament the loss of Louve, though note the departure of Ren and her Gordius model is also a loss. Soon enough, the Society's Grandmaster now arrives to thank Campanella for observing in his stead as Enforcer No. 0 returns the staff lent to Wiseman, now containing the Septarian, the Oriole. With the first pack no more, the Grandmaster proclaims the completion of the first phase of the Orpheus Final Plan, called the Gospel Plan, and now announces the beginning of the second phase, called the Phantasmal Blaze Plan. Meanwhile, there is a royal banquet celebrating the heroes of Liberl, and privately, Claudia confesses her love to Joshua, who lets her down gently. Expecting he would, she thanks him, as now she can move forward with no regrets. She also takes the time to reflect how when she first enrolled in the Royal Academy under her alias Chloe, she met the brilliant but laid-back student council president Lecter, who gave her good advice and guidance before suddenly dropping out and disappearing. 2 years would pass as Lecter would become a major part of Erebonia's newly formed intelligence division, working under the same Chancellor Osborne that Prince Olivert and Mueller are planning to overthrow. After the party, Chancellor Osborne himself would arrive to repeat his well-meaning but misunderstood intentions to help Liberl during the Orbital shutdown phenomenon, complimenting the kingdom on being able to respond to the crisis on their own. Not buying this, Olivert insists on speaking to Osborne privately, telling the Chancellor openly he does not approve of his open display of military power nor annexation of smaller countries into the Empire. He adds the seemingly peaceful acquisitions all seem to have been carried out in similarly suspicious manners that have also given rise to unhappy citizens and anti-imperial terrorism. Osborne notes his Secretary Lecter has handled terroristic threats targeting him well enough and mentions he will soon be departing to Crossbell to speak with a government representative there. Olivert is shocked to learn this, knowing Crossbell is a buffer state and hotspot for crime and terrorism, but Osborne smirks, instead mentioning how Olivert will be given a hero's welcome back home and encourages him to seize the opportunity to gain a firmer foothold in the country with it. Leaning in, Osborne knows Olivert also hates the current state of the Empire, resting on its laurels and chained down by useless nobles and meaningless traditions. He comments that they're both the same, vying for more influence in the Empire and want to reform the nation while they still can, offering the prince the chance to join him in his endeavor. Before replying, Olivert asks about his relationship with Ouroboros, and the Chancellor claims there is none, though remarks he is not above using any means to achieve his goal. Hearing this, Olivert declines the offer, agreeing they are very much alike, but disagreeing that the ends justify the means. With this, Osborne wishes him well in his path of reform, believing Olivert will find he has to work with the nobles he despises in order to achieve his goal too. Olivert has no counter as Osborne takes his leave, while at the same time Claudia recognizes Lecter waiting nearby and calls him out on his disappearance 2 years ago, wondering why he works for the Chancellor now. Lecter dodges the question, revealing he's been working with Osborne since before he even enrolled in the Academy, and adding that while her friend Prince Olivert is surprisingly capable, he's no match for Osborne. Later, when Olivert and Mueller prepare to return to Erebonia, Claudia reveals more information on Secretary Lecter's past, and Olivert and Cassius are not pleased to learn the Chancellor has been planting the Erebonian Intelligence Division across Liberl undetected for years under both of their noses. She also passes along a message from Lecter to Olivert personally, warning him to watch his back. To the side, Osborne is pleased to have outplayed the prince, considering him now one of his pawns like Lecter in the Society, knowing full well Lecter will likely betray him one day. He adds that the other Ironbloods are coming along well and that Olivert stands no chance, but Lecter isn't so sure, as Olivert pulls along Osborne atop the Arcel, throwing down the gauntlet his own way. 6 months pass as above eastern Erebonia, a masquerade party takes place within a luxury airship liner. One particular man observes the host was a war profiteer, rising quickly to be one of the Empire's most wealthy men, and seeing the guests preoccupied, breaks off on his own. Despite sensing some eyes still on him, the man breaks into the host's secret safe room where he locates the artifact called the Fool's Locket. Though he sets off the alarm, the masked man isn't worried, easily breaking down the reinforced door and emerging, revealing himself to be the Gralsritter priest Kevin. Breaking past all the host's hired men, Kevin exposes the merchant's illegal possession of an artifact, knocking him out and facing down a company of Jaegers before jumping through a window and making his escape via his airship he had prepared. To the side, Kevin's actions were indeed noticed by a certain mysterious guest who knows who he is, adding they have only just awoken. On his way back to Arteria, Kevin gets a message from his commander, Ein Selnit, also called Carnelia, who immediately puts him on another assignment to pick up an object from underneath Gransel Cathedral that may have to do with the Oriole, and assigns a talented rookie squire to his understaffed squad. Back in Liberl, Kevin meets with Lieutenant Colonel Sid, who then introduces him to a standoffish scientist named Erica Russell, who is Tita's mother and is not pleased Kevin is there to take away what she's been studying. Fiercely overprotective of her daughter, she despises how her father allowed Tita to go to the floating city full of danger and considers Agate to be absolute scum for being close to her daughter, intending to make his life miserable. As Kevin opens the way forward for them, he leads him to a hidden room created to suppress ancient artifacts stored within, called a Primal Ground. Sid explains the artifact here was found in the area where the Liber Arc sank, and Erica points out while it was discovered with orbital readings, it no longer exudes any energy, meaning the church has no jurisdiction over it. Erica demands ownership of the artifact, jabbing at the church's hoarding of knowledge when they are interrupted by a sister that Kevin is shocked to see, introducing herself as Rhys Argent, Kevin's newly appointed Gralsritter squire. She very flatly renders judgment that the church will be claiming the artifact, citing that powered or not, it is likely related to the Septarians. Suddenly, the artifact glows and unfolds, revealing a mysterious cube within, which concludes the ownership dispute. As they leave, Kevin asks Rhys if she's mad at him for not keeping in touch for the last 5 years, but she cuts him off, saying their relationship now is purely professional. However, with a growl of her stomach, Kevin jokes that she's still the gluttonous girl he always knew, convincing her to drop the formality. Kevin then notices the incompetent Ouroboros spy Gilbert tailing them, but he is easily dispatched by Rhys, who brandishes a Templar whipsword like her sister, as they take out his archaism together. Suddenly, the cube begins glowing again, and as Kevin takes it out, a mysterious man announces it is time to begin, catching his attention by revealing he even knows Kevin has a stigma on his back. The cube now glows with a blinding light as Kevin and Rhys are taken away to a strange place called the Hermit's Garden. Exploring, they find the library within houses dozens of forgotten, forbidden, or rare books alongside some modern and mundane ones for some reason. Kevin suspects this is an alternate dimension like with the altered space within the tetracyclic towers, but suddenly the cube lights up and both of their battle orbments are shattered. At the same time, areas of the garden now light up as well, including a corridor full of undead that resonates stronger to higher elements normally uncommon in Zemuria. A mysterious voice speaks out to them about the cube, unlocking various functions, including revealing a sealing stone that it says has someone trapped inside. Presenting the stone to a monument in the garden, the person trapped inside turns out to be Tita, who last remembers preparing dinner for Professor Russell and Agate when a bright light surrounded her. Exploring more, they also find recorded memories within, such as the time when Tita's parents actively tried to kill Agate with a prototype weapon capable of surpassing Patamata, orbital gear. Further in, the group is surprised to see the Arcel docked here and another sealing stone within. Releasing it, they find Captain Julia Schwartz inside, who was commanding the royal craft when she was taken, and not far they are surprised to find a legendary undead and one of the 77 devils that appears in the Testaments. Smiting the fiend, the masked man from before also appears to mock them, also knowing of Julia, Rhys, and Rhys's sister, easily deflecting Rhys's sneak attack. Declaring his lord wishes to see them suffer in this realm called Phantasma, he introduces himself as Schwartzritter, guardian of Phantasma, and takes his leave. Unexpectedly, Kevin thinks back to his past as an orphan when he first met Rhys and her older sister Rufina, who found him in a snow-covered alleyway. Breaking through his angry mood, Rufina would feed the boy some chocolate through a kiss, immediately changing his mood and changing his life from then on. Snapping back to reality, no one recognizes the name Phantasma, and Rhys explains that her sister Rufina was also a Gralsritter that died during a mission 5 years ago. Returning to the corridor, another gate leads them to a replica of Gransel devoid of citizens and instead riddled with monsters. Locating another sealing stone in the Erebonian embassy, they unseal it to free Major Mueller Vander, who last remembers accompanying Prince Oliver during an inspection of Parm. In addition, Rhys notices everyone sealed so far also knows each other and thinks that cannot be a coincidence. Elsewhere in False Gransel, they find the Capua's Bobcat ship docked, and Julia mentions the former Sky Bandits got a royal pardon and now do honest work operating a courier business. Inside, they find another sealing stone, breaking it to release Josette Capua, who was flying with her brothers over Crossbill when she was taken. In the arena, they find a replica of the Guardian underneath Genis Academy, taking it down and finding another sealing stone. Unsealing this one, Joshua Bright now emerges, mentioning he and Estelle were in Crossbill before being taken. Entering Gransel Castle and dispatching the wandering souls inside, they rescue Gilbert, who doesn't know anything about the situation, and leaves intending to spite them as revenge. Not far, they spot a ghostly woman who thanks them and gives them a key to access the rooms beneath the castle that have changed their layout somehow. Within, Kevin notices the smell of a devil about, and the masked person from the masquerade party reveals themselves, introducing himself as the Lord of Phantasma, confirming Kevin and Joshua's suspicions that this is a replica Grand Soul. However, they add that this doesn't mean those they care about in the real world are safe, hold another sealing stone, and summoning up another of the 77 legendary devils for them to overcome. The party prevails, and while the Lord of Phantasma gives them another sealing stone, they add that they are a shadow that only exists because someone within their number cast it. A painful memory now flashes in Kevin's mind, and irritated at the cryptic reply, he fires into the Lord of Shadow, revealing it was just an illusion. Unsealing the stone, both Princess Claudia and her falcon Sieg are released, and soon after they come to a fork and the ghostly woman reappears a bit more clearer. She says the twin corridors of his next plane must be progressed through in sync, and so Kevin and Reese each take a team along the gold and silver roads, defeating doppelgangers of each other and obtaining a sealing stone each. Reuniting, the Gralsritter both feel the twisted souls and fiends they have fought so far really point to their enemies somehow opening the gates of Gehenna. Schwarzritter now appears, leaving behind another cryptic message that Kevin is quick to mock, instead releasing the 2 sealing stones to free both Prince Oliver and Zin, both of whom are unfazed at their predicament. After being caught up on the situation, Oliver wonders if Kevin is somehow relevant to the Lord of Phantasma, as they know Rufina and the devils that exist within the church's texts. Kevin replies he has no guesses, and Reese suddenly voices that she doesn't feel well, sitting out on the next plane they'll be delving into. As Kevin catches up to her, an upset Reese asks him when he's going to drop his act, admitting to the side that she feels a little left out on all the reunions with friends he's made along the way, and jealous of how he grew so close to all of these people and yet avoided her for 5 years. She adds that she knows he was hurt by Rufina's death and has been blaming himself for it alongside diving into dangerous work as a sort of self-punishment. What more, she knows he's been keeping all of his friends at arm's length and won't let any of them get close to the truth. She also knows he's been pretending because she observed how he reacted to the Lord of Phantasma's and Schwarzritter's seemingly cryptic messages, deducing they were meant for him, and knows he's been hiding this fact from the group. Kevin deflects everything she just said, and not having it, Reese slaps him and runs off in frustration. Not far, Joshua enters, and seeing this opportunity to ask, Kevin wonders how much Joshua looked into him, and the former enforcer knows Kevin is one of the 12 dominions that lead the Gralsritter known as the Heretic Hunter. He also knows Kevin finished off Wiseman and allowed Estelle to be captured and taken on board the Glorious, but all the same is grateful Kevin freed him of Wiseman's control and prevented him from killing Estelle. Kevin claims that was done for his own sake to close in on the kill for Wiseman more than Joshua's sake, but all the same Joshua is grateful and offers to be his backup in Reese's absence. Appreciating the help, Kevin takes the team to the next layer of Phantasma where they find a replica of the Lalakla Bracer training facility in Layman State near Crossbell and Liberl. After a skirmish with some beastmen, the Ghost Woman appears to tell them of 3 trials they must overcome here. Defeating a mirage of Annalise and Shara, they recover sealing stones containing the real Annalise and Shara, and are surprised to see Shara with a new haircut and outfit. Finishing the final trial, they defeat a false agate and unseal the real one as well, much to the delight of Tita, who rushes over to hug him. Soon after, they defeat another legendary devil gatekeeping their way, who uses the original Evil Eye binding magic Wiseman based his technique on, but is saved just in time by Reese, who attempts to hold it back on her own. Despite her best efforts, she is beaten down, and seeing no other choice, Kevin releases more of his true power, as a red insignia appears on his back and easily destroys the devil with a devastating attack. It leaves behind a sealing stone in its defeat, as the Lord of Phantasma appears, chuckling how their words earlier came true in relation to Kevin, and offers to reveal her face to him, but the priest hesitates. Laughing again, the Lord of Phantasma takes their leave as the group unseals the next stone to rescue Estelle, but the reunion is cut short as Kevin lurches over in pain and hands the cube to Reese for now as he passes out in exhaustion. As he rests, Kevin dreams of days past, such as when he used to have nightmares as a child after being taken in by the church thanks to Rufina, and the day that Rufina would begin her squire training. Years later, Kevin himself would quickly be appointed as a squire too, under the instruction of First Dominion Ein Selnet, and is congratulated by Rufina as well. However, to the side, Rufina thinks Kevin may be strong enough to manifest a stigma, but worries that because of this, his kindness will be his downfall. After 2 years, Kevin was planning to meet up with Rufina after they were both set to return home for the first time since he became a knight. However, her train would be delayed, and at the same time, Kevin would be informed some Jaegers have occupied Astor House, the home and gospel facility Kevin, Reese, and Rufina grew up in. Seeking to save those inside, Kevin would prepare to take on the group alone. After some time, Kevin is seen still mourning Rufina's tragic death and is told by Selnet to pull himself together as he's been appointed 5th Dominion of the Gralsritter, a position that has been vacant for several decades. Laughing at the situation, Kevin bitterly states how ironic it is that he became a knight to protect Rufina, but ends up getting promoted because of her death. Grimly, he not only accepts the position but demands they give him as much work as they can, choosing his title to be the Heretic Hunter. Back with the group, Joshua thinks the mark on Kevin's back was a more powerful version of the stigma mark Wiseman placed on his shoulder, and Reese confirms this, reassuring everyone Kevin will be fine from his overexertion. She also clarifies Kevin has an original stigma over the artificial replica Joshua had, and it's something all the Dominions possess, granting him strength beyond human limitations and usage of high-level thaumaturgy. Historically, there have always been 12 stigma users at any given time, whether the brand-bearers were aware of them or not, and notes that Wiseman was once a bishop in the Congregation for the Sacraments, which the Gralsritter report to. Having access to hidden research, the professor stole a lot of knowledge for the Society, including a means to make super soldiers of his own. Now embarking for the next layer, they cut through Dream Devils and find another sealing stone on its own in the labyrinth, unsealing it to reveal Alan Richard, former colonel of the Royal Army Intelligence Division, now running a research agency called RNA Research. In fact, he brings up he was brought here in his old uniform when he hasn't worn it for months, wondering how that's possible. Joining forces, they also see the Patamata floating in space before another sealing stone, and unsurprisingly find it releases Ren. Overjoyed at finally finding her again, Estelle gives her a hug, though Ren pushes her away. Joshua tries to explain they've been searching for her for months, following her to Crossbell, and knows she hasn't rejoined Ouroboros since they last departed. Tita also tearfully insists Ren drop the act and admits she's happy to see them too, and faced with her plea she reluctantly accepts. After getting caught up, Ren theorizes Phantasma manifests attachments into reality, using Richard's uniform as an example, basically shaping the world based on people's thoughts. Ren adds this also explains the places and things they have also seen so far, though the realm itself is still formed under the Lord of Phantasma with their stolen power from the Hermit Ghost Lady. Going back to defeat the legendary devils at the end of the plane, they are surprised to see a sealing stone, but not like the ones they've seen so far, emanating an almost divine light. Stepping in, Schwarzwitter says it contains a rulebook of sorts that will help them, taunting them that their trials ahead will include him. Unsealing the stone, the group is shocked to see the full form of the voice of the cube and ghost that has been guiding them so far, introducing herself as Celeste Oslis, ancestor to the royal bloodline and the one who sealed away the Oriole. However, she clarifies she is not the original and only a copy made to influence Phantasma from within. Explaining more, Celeste reveals Phantasma is a world belonging to a higher plane of existence created several thousand years ago by the Oriole. Its purpose was to act as a subsystem for the Oriole in order to process and fulfill the wishes and desires of the Liber Arc people. Another way to think of it would be a self-organized world designed to realize countless possible other worlds. As the applied side of the Oriole, she and others observed it while thinking of a way to seal the Oriole, resulting in the Recluse Cube. The cube is the only thing able to interact with Phantasma without going through the Oriole. The original Celeste would then copy herself into Phantasma to sabotage it from within, creating the garden as her base of operations and opening a long enough window for those outside to seal the Oriole. Afterwards, the copy would fall asleep and act as a failsafe guide if the Oriole was ever unsealed. She confirms the Oriole did disappear, but then the Lord of Phantasma appeared out of nowhere, stole her power, and then began to remake Phantasma per their own designs. Unfortunately, she has no idea who they are, what their end goal is, or why they are testing the group personally. What she does know is the Lord of Phantasma created a new 7th plane for themselves and suspects that is where they are now. Chiming in is Kevin, now recovered, who shares he has a good idea who the Lord of Phantasma really is, but wants to confirm one last thing to be certain, thinking he'll find his answer in the 6th plane. Entering, they find the replica location to be the pond and land near the royal villa. Finding another gate within that can only be opened by Claudia, they soon find themselves in a monochromatic version of Genis Royal Academy. They also find hostile replicas of several people they know from the real world, like the Raven Gang and Philip the Butler, forced to defeat them to proceed. With Annalise, they find a replica society facility and challenge a false Grant, Karna, Kurt, and Keelika. With Richard, they enter a replica Leyston Fortress to defeat shadows of Sid, Canon, General Morgan, and even Cassius Bright. Finally, with Joshua, they arrive on a black version of the Glorious, facing down ghosts of Dawn, Kyle, Blue Blanc, Walter, and Luciola, with Schwarzritter waiting for them at the end. Before they fight, Joshua demands to know why Schwarzritter even wears a mask, since they all already know the face behind it, and proving his point, breaks it during their fight to reveal the face of Louve behind it. Despite him being a fabrication of the Lord of Phantasma, Joshua is glad to have the opportunity to see him again, knowing the mask was a result of Joshua's own inability to accept the real Louve's death. Louve confirms this, adding he was summoned to this world to act as the final strongest guardian, but the Lord of Phantasma did not put a mask on him, as that was the desire of Likely from the group. He then takes the time to apologize to Ren for leaving in the manner he did, and asks Kevin if there is any uncertainty in his mind left, and Kevin confirms he has all doubts removed. His purpose fulfilled, the Shadow of Louve thanks Joshua for burying his sword at Karen's grave and disappears, assuring him they are now resting in peace. Moving on, Reese and Kevin are key to approaching the next area, a replica of their old home of Astor House, explaining it was something of a mix of an orphanage and monastery. Entering the chapel, Kevin tells Reese on the fateful day that Rufina died, a hired Jaeger Corps took over the place, as it turns out the orphanage was a front for hiding an artifact that needed sealing away. The day the raid occurred was the same day Rufina and Kevin were due to return after a long absence, but when her train got delayed and he got the alert, all he could think about was Reese and the others in danger. On his own, Kevin was able to take down all the Jaegers and free everyone, however, Reese was kidnapped elsewhere. Kevin pauses his tale to confess to Reese that the dark mood they first found him in was because he was fresh from his mother dying, and feels personally responsible for letting her die. He loved his mother growing up, though when he was 7, his wealthy father chose to abandon her, sending his mother into despair. Despite trying to cheer her up after a period of deep depression, his mother would try to strangle Kevin in his sleep, apologizing for being a failure and was intending to kill him and then herself. Desperately, Kevin fought back, running away in the winter snow, and after calming down would go back home only to find his mother having already committed suicide, and a stigma would form soon after. Returning back to the day of the Jaeger attack, Kevin would follow Reese's trail to the primal ground beneath the chapel, confronting the kidnapper standing next to the Spear of Loa, which transforms the body of its wielder into a monster. When the Jaeger grabbed it, they turned into a monster too strong for Kevin to handle, but right when they tried to kill Reese, his stigma awoke, leeching all the power from the spear into himself, giving him the power to brutally slaughter the inhuman foe. However, Kevin had no control over his new power yet, and at this point, Rufina arrived, quickly understanding the situation. She defended Reese as best she could, even shielding her with her own body, but a berserk Kevin would fire upon her mercilessly. With her dying breath, Rufina would hug Kevin, who would then come to his senses only after having killed her. In shock, Reese denies this, but Kevin clarifies that in that moment, he saw Rufina standing against him like his mother trying to kill him, and despite loving them both, he would be the reason they both died. Willing to now accept any consequence, Kevin surrenders himself to Reese, who angrily grabs him by the collar, demanding to know why Kevin shouldered this burden for 5 years, and more upset he refused to tell her or let her do anything to help him. Feeling betrayed, she calls him out for spending 5 years hunting dangerous heretics not as a way to atone, but to seek a means to be punished for what he did. Affirming this, the Lord of Phantasma appears, and Kevin says he's now ready to see the face beneath the mask, calling the Lord out as Rufina herself. Congratulating Kevin on his correct deduction, Kevin now willingly surrenders to Rufina, as she explains to a confused Reese that her shadow was born here in order to give Kevin the punishment he desires. In fact, her creation of Phantasma inviting all of them here was a result of Kevin's wish, and Kevin agrees, ready to drop into his own personal hell. Reese rejects this, calling the shadow a mockery of her sister, and reminds Kevin the real Rufina, like she did in real life, never let him sink into despair no matter how much he gave up on the world and always dragged him back. Not having it, Shadow Rufina binds the group and opens a fissure to drop Reese into the 7th plane instead, and Reese shoots back that she'll live and still come back to save Kevin. As she drops, Kevin activates his stigma, freeing the team and dives in after Reese, grabbing her in time and safely landing them in a replica of Gehenna. Alone, Kevin states he thought by sacrificing himself and letting everyone return to live their own lives that he would be like Rufina, but Reese corrects him, saying Rufina only sacrificed herself because she saw no other choice, not because she wanted to. Knowing this to be true, Kevin now declares that with Reese down here, he cannot simply stay here either, promising they'll both get out together. In this hellscape, Kevin also faces the angry ghosts of his past, starting with the exiled bishop who hired the Jaegers to attack Astor House as revenge. He then has to put down a child he couldn't save from being turned into a monster by a cult, and Reese holds him, asking why he chose to bear this burden alone. Kevin replies he was afraid that by showing her his desire for punishment, he would lose her too and couldn't bear it. Insisting again he relies on her going forward, she helps him put down the haunting spirit of his mother, still intent on killing him in her misery. Finally, Kevin faces the vengeful ghost of Wiseman, who reveals that while this Gehenna is a reflection of Kevin's desires, the cause is actually his own stigma. Elaborating, he repeats that Phantasma is a subsystem of the Oriole, and when the Oriole disappeared, it sought a new master to control it, latching onto Kevin, copying his stigma, and manifesting his hidden dark desires. Kevin steps forward, acknowledging he needs to get stronger, as it was his weakness and cowardice that got his mother and Rufina killed, and got Reese in trouble here. Accepting himself and ready to move on, he summons his stigma in the face of 2 high-ranking devils, revealing its light side form he was never able to see before. Decimating Wiseman again, the professor states that as long as Phantasma exists, he will never be a memory, as Kevin finds he isn't as fatigued using his stigma anymore. Finding Gilbert somehow in the Home for Infinite Losers 2, the pair are trapped at the gates of the realm, when on the other side, the rest of the group is able to enter on their own and rescue them with the help of Celeste. With the help of everyone cutting a path through the devils, Kevin, Reese, and Gilbert escape safely, and back in the garden, Kevin tells them the truth beginning to end. The group thinks he's being too hard on himself, as even if Phantasma didn't choose Kevin, it would have chosen someone else, and it just would have made another world based on their wishes and trauma. Ren adds it was for the best that it was Kevin, as the stigma is a powerful force, and only someone as strong as Kevin could control it and thus bring order to the rest of Phantasma. Thanking them for their forgiveness and friendship, Kevin feels the final fight with Rufina is all that's left, as Celeste tells them she's outside of the crafted realms and it expands the size of the Zemurian continent. Needing to cross the void quickly, Tita thinks they can use the replica Arcel they found, and Celeste agrees but points out it will be a one-way trip. Making final preparations and exploring the plains thoroughly, the group uncovers a lot of lore as they gamble, participate in a trivia game show, fight in an arena tournament, and shoot down Jaegers as they deliver packages. They also learn of a giant white pillar dubbed the Salt Pail once striking the North Ambria capital city a couple of decades ago, solidifying everyone and everything nearby it. The calamity would spread, consuming half of the country and killing a third of the population, until suddenly after 3 days total, the original pillar would condense into a small fragment with strange engravings. Still dangerously potent, the church used other artifacts to safely handle and remove the object. Attempts to reform the principality would fail, resulting in the creation of a city-state where the military would adapt into a more mercenary force, creating the Northern Jaegers. All the same, the question of where the Salt Pail came from was never answered, though the Septian Church has found ways to weaponize the Salt Pail fragment for their own internal use. Now embarking on the last leg of their journey, they pour their will and imagination into the replica Arcel to push it to its theoretical limits and break through the boundaries of the plains and shoot past into the wasteland beyond. To himself, Kevin thinks it's less likely that Oriel simply vanished and more likely it was stolen by Campanella, but is interrupted as they approach a castle in the distance. Reese notes it resembles the cathedral in Arteria as Rufina welcomes them to her castle, Phantasmagoria. She tells the group they'll have to split up to traverse it, pitting them against dark versions of the Patamata, Ruin Guardian, and Ragnar the Dragon. As Kevin confronts Rufina, he not only repeats that she's not a copy of the real Rufina, she's actually the copy of his dark stigma that was made here 6 months ago, so he knows he can win this battle. Surprised Kevin figured it out, the shadow assumes its true form, announcing itself as Anima Mundi, the world's core and soul. Assuming a massive monstrous form, Kevin, Reese, and their collection of comrades and allies edge out a win against the Dark Essence. Upon its destruction, the stigma changes color to a lighter one, and the two Gralsritter are taken to the ghost of Rufina. Freed of the stigma's influence, she thanks them and is proud of how strong they have become, but informs them Kevin needs to destroy her now in order to prevent the stigma from regaining its strength and to get rid of it for good. Doing this will also restore Celeste's power, and she can return them to the real world, and with no other option, Kevin agrees, not running away this time. Reese understands as well and insists on doing it too so as to not be left behind by them again this time, and in response, Rufina tells them both not to be content with following in her footsteps, but to go even further beyond to a future she couldn't reach. Agreeing, Kevin and Reese hold hands as they pull the trigger together, destroying the stigma copy and finding closure to a painful chapter of their lives. Supporting each other in their grieving farewell, Kevin and Reese are brought back to the group as Celeste indeed regains her powers, but mentions Phantasma will now return to being unstable, lacking a master. She opens the gate of light for them, telling them they will return to the place they were pulled from, and one by one the group says their farewells. Olivert pauses to ask Shara to seriously consider what he asked her, and she said she would give him an answer someday, as long as he worked on what he needed to do, much to the curiosity of the group. Quickly, Mueller adds it will be up to Olivert to avoid the worst case scenario in the stormy days they'll be facing in Erebonia ahead. Irritated, Ren disagrees with leaving such an influential power like the Guard behind, and more to the point, doesn't want to say goodbye to everyone. Understanding, Estelle reminds her life is full of goodbyes anyway, no matter what, pointing out it's better to smile and be positive together as they look forward to the next time they may meet again. Joshua offers again to be her family, alongside Estelle and Cassius, and running off, Ren declares she hates all of them, but loves them just as much, as the Bracers have every intention of chasing her again when they get back. Also, Gilbert was there but nobody noticed because he didn't matter. The last one's out, Celeste tells Kevin and Reese the Recluse Cube will stop functioning as soon as they leave and will never reactivate, and Kevin is sure Erica will be glad to hear that. As the game ends, the Gralsritter pass through the gate, their partnership stronger than ever, reporting to Commander Selnit upon their return, who notices a positive change in Kevin's words and behavior. In response, Kevin asks if he can change his Dominion title, wanting to do more than just hunt heretics now, and laughing, the First Dominion says it's unprecedented, but entirely possible. Though Kevin submits a few new ideas, his mentor sighs and heavily suggests he works with Reese to choose a better one. The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky III has enjoyed the success of selling over 280,000 copies worldwide. Thanks for watching the video, I hope it helped prepare you for the next Crossbell arc. If you enjoyed the recap, then leave a like, and big thanks to the patron and channel member knights. Links in the description for how to support the channel and get extra videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next battlefield.